My son Michael and his former business partner Jason were extradited to Budapest on Monday the 2nd of November 2009 on an accusation of corporate fraud relating to a business that they ran in Hungary which they started in 2002. The business folded and it was a limited company, but nonetheless there was an accusation that there were £18,000 worth of creditors. This was very much an accusation. Of course, they're completely innocent, and my son Michael didn't even know what corporate fraud was, never mind how to commit it. And fraud, as I'm sure we all know, is something you can't commit accidentally. We tried to oppose the extradition through the British courts, but after a year of trying, it became clear that the courts were being directed from outside of this jurisdiction, and there was no way, they were completely powerless to stop it. The conditions under which they are held are completely dire, which contradicts all the promises that they were made when the extradition took place. The Hungarian authorities promised that on arrival they would have access to a telephone and be able to phone home, say where they were and to say that they were well. Our concerns became raised when, after a couple of days, we'd heard nothing. We contacted the British consulate in Budapest, and they didn't know of their confinement. They didn't even know that the Hungarians had arrested them. So we employed the services of a Budapest lawyer who went about finding them and then informing the British consulate of their whereabouts. And they have made everything as difficult as possible right from the beginning. They refused. They were refused access to my son, and it took a lot of paperwork signing on this side of in this country before we could actually get the lawyer in to see them. The conditions under which they are being held, and remember, these are young men that went to the airport and went of their own volition. They weren't taken away screaming in handcuffs. An accusation had been made, so they went to answer that accusation. And they've been given no bail facility. They're being held in a former KGB prison. It must be a very large establishment, because apparently they're being held on the 7th floor. They're locked for 23 hours a day in a cell with 3 other Hungarians who can't speak the language, or they're not able to speak to. Michael and his former business partner Jason are kept in completely separate parts of the prison, so they can never communicate together. They have no occupational material there, so they've got nothing to read. They've no writing material. They've not as yet received any letters in or out. And only now have we had a couple of sporadic phone calls after much political and consular pressure. Having had phone calls from them only went to bring light to or to establish our worst fears. We talked about food. He just had a meal when I spoke to him of a piece of pork fat and bread, and said that that was a change because most of the food comes in liquid form. I'd spoken to him. He'd already been in detention for 2 weeks and he was still wearing the clothes that he was arrested in. He'd not had access to a shower. He'd not even been able to brush his teeth. My comments were that this this regime was totally cruel and barbaric. He went into their care fit and healthy, and we just pray to God that he comes home in the same state. And the only one short court appearance that they've managed to have so far was how I think we would call it in camera, that there was no press allowed inside and no public benches.
Was he allowed his lawyer?
His lawyer was able to make a representation, but they did appeal against that decision. That decision was that they would be kept and detained more or less indefinitely without charge, and no charges would be levied against them. The lawyer attempted to appeal that, but the appeal was heard without the defendants being present or the lawyers being present, just the prosecution and the judge.
But in this country, you can only be jailed or kept in confinement for 28 days, and then you have to. They have to charge you, but I don't know how. I believe on the continent you can be locked up for a year or more without even being charged.
Absolutely. Their lawyer has already informed me that he believes there is no way the prosecution, if they're to bring charges at all, will be ready to bring charges before next Easter.
I understand that you were able to send them a parcel. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, we were finally told that we could send them a parcel. We've been told we'll be able to send one small parcel every month. This was what the prison authorities referred to as to send them some luxuries, such as toothpaste, soap, deodorant, and Michael even asked for toilet roll, soap powder to wash their clothes, because in this regime they provide nothing. So we rushed this parcel off in the most express means we could. It cost over £60 just for the postage to be able to get it there quickly. And Michael, the guards went to Michael and said, Michael Turner, we have a parcel for you. And he was elated. But they turned round to him then immediately and said, but we're not giving it to you. And of course he was devastated. Behaviour now which I think is almost psychological torture. When he inquired why he couldn't have the parcel, they said they didn't like the way the sender's address was written. So they said they were sending it back. So with this, Michael asked the guards if he could have his right to phone the British consulate, and they replied, no, you cannot. So they said you can phone your designated contact number in the United Kingdom. So Michael then phoned here in the United Kingdom and asked to make a complaint and said, can you make a note, they won't let me phone the consulate and they won't let me have this parcel that you've sent me. So we immediately phoned the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, who phoned their contacts at the British Embassy, who contacted Michael's lawyer. And between them all they managed to get hold of the relevant parties, and they managed to track the parcel on its way back to the UK at the 9th Precinct Post Office in Budapest. And there, with help of some senior political figures, we are now told it's on its way back to the prison. Whether or not he actually receives it, we'll still have to wait and see. But also the complaint was made to the embassy that he wasn't able to make his phone call to the consulate, which is a right, not a privilege. That's a right that he has because the Hungarian authorities have signed up to this extradition treaty, and in the treaty arrangements to be what they referred to as a trusted extradition partner. That's a right that they have to adhere to. So the embassy took up his complaint and asked why he wasn't allowed to telephone the embassy. And the prison's official response was that Michael couldn't phone the embassy because he had no credits on his phone card. Well, that clearly doesn't wash, because Michael, as an alternative, made an international call to England to complain. So clearly that was not true. Also, the embassy had to remind him that it wasn't a privilege to phone the consulate, it was a right, and that if a prisoner had no money or no funds, they had to provide the facilities to be able to make a telephone call to the consulate. They said that they realised this, but they thought it was an emergency. It was not an emergency, and they saved such rights for emergencies. And once again, because they said they thought he just wanted to complain about his parcel, and they didn't see that as an emergency. And again, the embassy had to inform the Hungarian authorities that the nature of the telephone call was between the prisoner and the consulate, and was of no consequence to the prisoners. It was not to them to make value judgments on what was important and what wasn't, what was permissible and what wasn't. Their job was just to allow the telephone call to take place. They pointed out it could well have been the guards themselves that he wanted to complain about, and may feel that he would have endangered his own personal well-being by informing him of the true nature of or reasons for his telephone call. So once again, the Hungarian authorities were shown to be being dishonest at an institutional level. And I really fear for Michael now, what chance will he have of a fair trial when they have no jury system and this type of dishonesty prevails?
Can I ask you what happened on Monday when you went up to London?
Yes, we had quite an uplifting day on Monday because we had a lot of support. We had a coach load bus from here, went up to London. We met the Right Honourable Jim Knight, who was a superb host in so much as showing us around and taking our letters from us and posing in front of the camera. How much real work gets done behind the scenes, of course, only time will tell. I'm sorry if I seem sceptical on that point, but we will see in the future. From there, we went along to the Hungarian embassy, where we had pre-warned them that we would be coming, and asked them for the courtesy of somebody to be available to take letters of protest from us. Instead of actually taking letters of protest from us, they closed the doors, locked the doors, and would let nobody in or out of the building. And we could see there were clearly people inside, and the embassy was functioning as normal. But we had a press crew with us who were filming everything, and we were joined by William Dartmouth in our protest. But their response, instead of actually opening the door and taking our letters, which would we'd have thought would have been a very basic courtesy, they called the diplomatic police, and the response was we had 6 armed police officers arrive to move us along, to quieten our protest and move us away from the embassy so that the Hungarians could continue with their daily work. Now, luckily, with having both the film crew there and of course William Dartmouth, who was having none of it, and William Dartmouth took one of the police officers to one side and told him that they could go inside and tell the Hungarian authorities that he was insulted by their behaviour, and that not to take a letter off of us, which was a little thing to ask, and to remind them that we were not in Budapest now, we were on British sovereign territory, and that our protest would be heard. And with that, the police backed down. 3 of them disappeared, and 2 of them disappeared into the embassy to carry William Dartmouth's message into the embassy. And after long negotiations, they came out and said that Lord Dartmouth could go into the embassy, but he would be the only one admitted to the embassy. And he turned round and he said, "Nonsense." He said to the police officer, "You go back in and tell them again that these people have come a long way to make their protest, a completely peaceful protest, and all they want to do is hand in a letter." He said, "You'll be getting it anyway in the post. It will do you no harm whatsoever to take it in." He said, "I'm a member of the European Parliament, and I would consider it only courteous if you took these letters personally from the people who've written them." So the police went back in again, and with further negotiations, and eventually William Dartmouth stood his ground, and eventually I was able to go with him into the embassy, under armed escort of course, to hand over our letters to the Consulat General. So and a big thank you from all of us to William for that. He did very well. I watched when my son spent a year fighting his case through the British courts and through the British judicial system. I saw dozens and dozens of cases of extradition going before the courts, and every single one of them was instigated by an Eastern European country, and every single one of them involved money. And none of that was what the legislation was put there for. It was all to protect us from organised crime and from international terrorism, and there was certainly no sign of that in the very, very busy courts that we had to sit and wait in. I do know that even Graham Watson, the Liberal Democratic MEP who steered this legislation through the European Parliament, he has said himself that he is not happy in the way this legislation has been used. He feels that this is totally inappropriate, and he is meeting on Tuesday the 1st of December with the Hungarian permanent ambassador to the European Union, and wants to know exactly what's happening in the case of Mike and Jason. And he has also said to us that if he doesn't get the answers he's looking for from the ambassador, then he's going from there on to Budapest, and he will, if necessary, go directly himself to the prison. I gave an interview with a Hungarian TV station earlier in the week, and I do know that we've been, this case is now being discussed in the Hungarian press. And again, one of the annoying things is that I know that a representative of the Hungarian prison service has gone on Hungarian television to refute what they're calling the allegations that are being made in the English press, and stating that both men on arrival were offered telephone calls to their consulate, but both men declined. Michael says that when he was arrested, he wasn't offered the use of a telephone. He said, well, in that case, I believe I have the right to phone my consulate. I would like to phone the British Embassy and let them know of my whereabouts. And they just sneered at him and said, ha, they don't want to speak to the likes of you. But I believe that the good people of Hungary have high expectations of joining Europe, and we're looking forward to an increase in standards. And it's not about, we don't want them to drag us down to their standards. We want to be able to lift them up so that all the people of Europe and all the people of Hungary can enjoy better standards. Hungary have shown time and time again that they have no consideration for his human rights. They have no intention of adhering to them, because when things are pointed out to them that are wrong, they make no effort to remedy them whatsoever. They just intransigently continue as they are and scorn our calls to adhere to human rights. Our protest outside the Hungarian embassy was reported in Budapest, and within 24 hours of that, I had Hungarian journalists on the telephone, located as a source here through the internet, and we had Hungarian journalists wanting to ask questions. I think it is a different world now, and people are looking, even their Hungarian people are looking at this and thinking they know that they're being humiliated. We've been contacted by Hungarian people who are living in England and are embarrassed for the government. They have used expressions like, oh dear, they seem to be up to their old tricks again. We're going back to the old ways. And they have higher expectations than that. On our website now, we're getting people leaving comments on there from Hungary. We've even had Hungarian comments where people can't speak English, and we have, I think it's a radio station from Hungary, have left comments on there in Hungarian on behalf of their listeners. Some of the comments we've had we like, some of them we don't like. But the great thing is, all of their comments are welcome, because here we have we have an open system, and everybody's entitled to their say. And as long as it's not, deliberately offensive or racist or whatever, then then please, they can leave whatever comments they like. We don't ask them to agree with us.
That's right.
So, with regard to the legislation that took my son to Hungary, and that's the European Extradition Act of 2003.
Yeah.
We now have on our website, there is a petition to petition 10 Downing Street for this Extradition Act to be repealed or to be reconsidered. And so if anybody wants to sign on to the website, which is www.freemikeandjason.co.uk, have a look at that, and if you are a British resident, do get on there and sign that. It's sponsored by UKIP, by their European MPs, and do go on there and give it your support.
Oh, that's great, yeah.
Ordinary working people, referral to the European Court of Human Rights, or the European courts at all, although it is an avenue that's open to anybody, it's not, it's not as practical and as easy as it looks, because first of all it costs a great deal of money, and at the moment money's in short supply because Michael's legal fees are astronomical as they are. But his barrister in London has already said that he believes already Michael has a claim against the Hungarian authorities which he can pursue in the European courts. On a practical note, however, it would be expensive and lengthy, and the chances are that this issue in Hungary will have already been finalised, and Michael would be repatriated back to the UK before the case was ever heard in the European Court. Now, it doesn't mean to say it wouldn't be a proper thing to do, to at least get on record that and put the Hungarians have that recorded of their abuses or whatever. But and the compensation levels awarded by the European courts are very, very low. and very, very low, because they're more there for establishing that principle of wrongdoing than awarding, like a commercial court, a large amount of money. And it's a shame that I'm sure more cases, if it were easier, would be going to the European Court, and you should be able to see a league table there, which countries have had which actions against them, so that people can actually make judgments for themselves of which countries to avoid and which countries play by the rules.
Definitely.
As time goes by. And I don't know, I believe at some point what they will aim to do with Michael and Jason, again time will tell, is they will want to, as quickly as possible, make them convicted prisoners and then put a price on their head. There will be a case of, if you pay X amount of pension, maybe this magic £18,000, you now pay £18,000 and then they can come home again.
But I just want to thank you, Mark, for allowing us to film here tonight, and I hope you receive some good news in the not too distant future. We'll all be with you and we're all thinking of you, and as I say, hopefully some good news will come soon.